Today we're getting back to the roots of a Trekzone conversation, interviews with sci-fi alumni. I'm thrilled to welcome author and TV writer Melinda Snodgrass to the show.
Across Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts and YouTube, this is the 8th season of a Trekzone Conversation with Matt Miller.
Well, Melinda, welcome to Trekzone.
Thank you very much, Matthew, for inviting me. I'm really excited to be part of this.
It is a great thrill to have you on the show. And as I said in the intro there as well, the roots of a Trekzone conversation is interviewing every sci-fi alumni in the world. So it is great that you're here with us to chat about your writing across the years.
Well, I've been doing it for a long time. After I decided I did not want to be a lawyer anymore, I got much better. I'm a reformed lawyer now. But and I had dear friends who were writers, and they encouraged me to try, and I did, and it's been a career that has been so incredibly rewarding for me. I'm very grateful to them for all the support over the years.
Well, some of your writing credits include creating a couple of series of books. There's Edge, Imperials, and Circuit, all different sets of stories with a few years between them. What inspired you to create them?
A lot of these series come out of my education, actually. The Circuit books are about a federal court judge writing Circuit in outer space, because I was trained as an attorney. And I also have another series that I had written under pseudonym, which we're bringing back out now under my own name, about a young woman lawyer working in a vampire law firm in Manhattan, that draws a lot on some of my experiences. And even Imperials, which is a space opera, I'm much more interested in how societies in crisis function and deal with these problems of class differences and growing inequality. So it's less about spaceships shooting each other and more about marginalized people and humans as the evil invading aliens instead of the other way around. And then the Edge books were my reaction to the fact that we're in the 21st century and there are still people who put more credence in crystal power and guardian angels and getting their auras balanced than they do in science and medicine and just rationality. So the Edge books are about the war between science and rationality and superstition, religion, and magic. And I come down on the side of rationality. And in some ways, that's also ties back into the law because without law, civilization is not possible.
One thing I love is that you said you were a lawyer and you've written some books about lawyers in sci-fi settings. Does it help bring a sense of realism to write about stuff that you know?
I think it helps. I don't think it's required. I think teachers who tell students that you can only write what you know, well, none of us have met aliens, so those of us who are writing science fiction are not going to be able to, write from our experience. But I do think that anything you studied and learned can add to what you bring to your writing and enriches it and deepens it. When I lecture, I do a lot of guest lectures at universities and even some high schools. I always urge the students to, stay in school. I sound like a little, the principal giving a little lecture. I'm serious about this because nothing that you learn is ever wasted as a writer. Even to the point of sitting in a coffee shop. I mean, we're terrible eavesdroppers who will sit and overhear conversations, and you never know when that's going to end up in somebody's book. And we just hope that person we eavesdropped on is not going to recognize themselves. We try to be careful. But we really are students of the world, as writers, just pulling it all in this sort of amorphous way of saying, give me everything so that I can pour it back out on a page.
Well, you wrote some stories for Sequest DSV, The Outer Limits, of course, Star Trek, and many more, a credits list across many genres. What's your favourite to write for?
Whatever it is I'm doing in the moment, I fall in love with it, which I think is good. It's awful to write something that you're not passionate about. I mean, obviously, I think my first love is science fiction. My dad would read aloud to me when I was a little girl before he taught me to read. And the book he read to me was 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. And then the very first novel I read sort of all by myself as a child was Edgar Rice Burroughs' A Princess of Mars. And so I think that ultimately science fiction is always going to have my heart. I mean, the idea of exploring the universe and seeing distant planets and hopefully meeting, new races of people is just always fired my imagination. And on balance, I read both. I enjoy both fantasy and science fiction, but my heart is with science fiction because I want to reach for the future, I guess.
Well, there are some obvious differences between writing a novel and writing a screenplay for TV. As a writer, is it hard to switch gears between the two?
I don't find it that difficult. I'm told that's a little bit unusual, but I think on balance, I was born to be a screenwriter because even my novels are very, very dialogue heavy. And I often forget to put in descriptions. That description is the bane of my existence. That was in our writers group. It was inevitably great dialogue, Melinda. Where are they? They could be in a white room, And so I try very hard now to involve the five senses. But there are moments when switching back and forth. I was in the midst of writing a script and writing one of the Edge novels, and I was working very fast to get something to submit to the writers group, and got to the meeting, and everyone was laughing at me because I had written on this one particular chapter, interior bedroom night. And then I went into the scene, and I was just sort of in that moment. I think it's just a matter of sitting down and thinking about where you are. The beauty of screenwriting is that you do so much with so little, and I love that. It's like, how much can you pack into a single line of dialogue? And of course, you're ultimately hoping you're going to have a wonderful actor to deliver that line of dialogue and sell all the subtext that you built into it. I mean, in novels, we can just tell you what the character is thinking and feeling, and finding a way to do it subtly in a screenplay is just really exciting to me.
I guess a novel has a bigger budget, if you will. You're not really constrained by production costs.
Exactly. And even more so, I've written a couple of graphic novels. I have a graphic novel that, please God, once the artist finishes, he's doing such a beautiful job, but it's taking a long time. It's a Wild Cards graphic novel. I mean, if being a novelist, you feel like you've got it all. When I wrote these graphic novels, you really are the director and the set designer, and describing even to the point of the light comes in through the window. I mean, you're telling the artist what you want in the panels, and to me that was sort of the ultimate no holds barred, no budgetary constraints, no worries about any of those other issues.
Well, it's your work on Star Trek that piqued our interest here at Trekzone. You were the story editor in TNG's second season and the executive script consultant in the third. However, you left the show and the franchise at that point. Can I ask what happened?
Star Trek was always a very fraught working experience. While the Federation might have been all about unity, I think the show, there were some issues. And the fact that it went through so many writers over the 7 years is an indication of a show where there was a lot of churn and turmoil. And I just felt like I needed to move on out of that atmosphere and that situation. And I went on to work on another show called Reasonable Doubts, which was a cop lawyer show. And, I learned about, how a show can be really well run and create this incredible sense of camaraderie between all the facets. We were very compartmentalized on Trek, and that became a little bit frustrating, that we weren't watching dailies, we weren't going over to the set. I mean, you can learn a lot from that. You can figure out, don't write a line of dialogue like that for this particular actor because they have trouble with it, or whatever it is. I think involving the writers in more of the process gives you a better product ultimately.
Well, Bruce Maddox, a character you created in TNG's second season episode, The Measure of a Man, is seemingly the central character in the new series. How did you feel when you learnt that?
Well, I was obviously very flattered that the gentleman who created Picard thought so well of Measure of a Man that they thought it worth building that it become a foundation for this new series. I actually didn't know any of this was happening until some fans began to send me messages on Twitter and through Facebook because I didn't have CBS All Access. So I had no idea. I mean, yes, obviously I'm flattered. Honestly, I would have liked to have known. It would have been nice to get to be excited ahead of time, I guess. But now that we're into it, I'm glad that it offered this opportunity for them to build on that story and build on the issues of artificial intelligence and what is sentience and all those various questions.
Have they continued the character in the way that you would have hoped, or what would you hope that the Bruce Maddox we see in Picard is doing, and what's he become?
Well, I'm hoping that if he did indeed create Dash and Soji, the two androids, I'm hoping that he created them out of, in a way, a love for Data and as a gift to his memory. I'm a little bit puzzled by the whole synth thing, the army of synthetics that were on Mars that were nuts and blew everything up. And was Bruce responsible for them? I mean, did he build all of them? Because the whole point of Measure of a Man was that Starfleet shouldn't create an army of disposable people. And my feeling was that Maddox had learned that lesson, that he walked away from that experience, setting aside sort of a pure scientific curiosity and looking at the morality side of it as well as the scientific side of it. And I'm just not certain, what they've turned him into. I hope he hasn't become either a weird crank or that he learned nothing, and that he's a sort of, Dr. Frankenstein type of gentleman who has gone ahead and violated everything that Picard and Guinan, to some degree, tried to impart to him. So I'll be curious to see what they do with the character, and that will be fun, because to see a character that I created actually get screen time again would be pretty exciting.
And I believe that we can catch more of your thoughts with a watch of episode 5 through the Make It So podcast. You're going to be guest appearing on that one?
Yes, we actually did one for episode 4 too. My thoughts on episode 4. I was with the Make It So guys, and we're doing it again for episode 5. It's fun. I mean, as I told Josh and Mike, I have the absolute worst superhero name in the world, but I'm sort of plot structure girl. So I was able to, point out things that I would have done differently in episode 4, and I'll be curious to see what they do with 5. It looks like it's going to be a bit of a romp, given the previews and those crazy outfits that they're wearing. And I have to say, I love Agnes. Because she's actually able to just say the things that we all want to say sometimes. That level of sort of gentle humor is really a relief to me. Sometimes Star Trek, particularly Next Generation, could seem very humorless, and I'm liking the little bit of levity that is in this show.
Well, I think we're going to just have to keep watching and see where the story takes us, and see what exactly Bruce Maddox is up to these days. Some 30 years, I think it is, 35 years since we last saw him in The Measure of a Man.
Interesting. Yes, I wonder who they're going to cast. Which actor of elevated years will they have found to play Bruce? I'll be very, very curious. So I'm looking forward to it.
Well, you can find Melinda on Twitter at @MMSnodgrass. You can find us across social media. Just search for Trekzone, and you can find me on Twitter at Miramat86. Melinda Snodgrass, thanks so much for having a Trekzone conversation today.
Thank you so much for having me.